Welcome to Santa's Little Stitches. In this series, we'll knit our way through a merry collection of Christmas characters, bringing a touch of handmade holiday magic into each stitch. This is the very first episode of Santa's Little Stitches. Today we're starting our holiday collection with none other than Santa Claus himself. For this project, you'll need a 32 needle and 22 needle circular knitting machine, a 6 needle I-cord maker, a pom-pom maker, hot glue gun, and your basic kit. The yarn I'm using is Big Twist Cream, Deep Red, White, Black, Light Rose, and Caron Simply Soft Gold. The other supplies that you'll need is fiberfill stuffing, a hot glue, and a 6-inch template. So let's get started with the body. I'm going to go through the knitting on the machines fairly fast. To start, we'll use our 32 needle and knit 20 rows in cream. When changing colors, tie the tails in a half knot. We'll finish those knots in the next step. Next, we'll switch over to the red and knit 7 rows. Then change to black for 2 rows. Back to red for 5 more rows. Change to white for 2 rows. And then back to red for 7 rows. Change to black for 14 rows. And then red for 23 rows. And lastly, cream for 20 rows. Once you have finished the 20 rows of cream, you can bind off the machine. Once the tube is off the machine, turn it inside out and secure any of the color changes and trim the ends. Then fold it in half with matching wrong sides and cinch both ends closed. I'm going to keep those tails for later. And then I turn it inside out. And you'll notice that these 2 stripes, the black and the white, is on the outside. Now I'll just go ahead and stuff this entire tube with the polyfill. After I have it filled, I'll take some black yarn, and I'm using kind of a long piece, and we'll close up the bottom of this tube. I'm going 7 rows up from the red. That's the halfway point of this section, and picking up 1 leg of every stitch going all the way around. And cinch this closed and secure with a knot. I want to make sure that I don't have any lumps in this piece, and I can always add a little more fiberfill if needed before closing up this hole. Leave those long tails. To create the leg separation, I'm using one of the tails and I'm going in right through that color change seam, and I'm going to go down 2 rows and insert my needle through to the other side, directly across to the other side. and I'm going to come out 2 rows below the white line. And then take the other tail, and we're going to go through the exact same hole, but in the opposite direction. Be careful not to snag the other piece of yarn. If you do, it will be harder to cinch up. So I'm just going to make sure it's kind of centered. I'll pull on both ends and then secure this with a knot. After the knot is secure, I can bury these 2 tails inside. Next, we'll add the separation for the head. I'm using one of those strands, actually the longest strand, from our tails that we clipped off earlier. Starting with the back side where the color change area is, I will insert the needle through both legs of one stitch, starting with that first row of red, and then go into the stitch directly above. In this case, my stitch is half red and half cream. And now into the next column, pick up the 2 legs of the next stitch of the red, then go directly above and pick up the 2 legs of the last row of the cream. So alternate between the red row and the cream row going all the way around, and you'll see when I do the cream row, I will automatically go into the next column and pick up the red. Just kind of saves a little step. Go through each column of stitches going through the red and then up to the cream, all the way around till you reach the beginning. Once that is finished, crisscross the tails and then pull on each end, and that will cinch up the neckline. And then you can adjust the stitches a little bit. When you're happy with how everything looks, you can go ahead and secure this with a knot and bury the tails. Set this piece aside while we work on the arms next. For the arms, we'll use the 22 needle machine, and again, I'll go through this fairly quickly. We'll cast on with red and knit 10 rows. When changing colors, tie the tails in a knot on the machine. This jog will be hidden. We did 2 rows of white, and now we'll do 3 rows of black before binding off. And then make a second arm. To assemble the arms, cinch the end, the black end closed, and then secure with a knot. This is the mittens of the Santa outfit. Next, we'll fold this in half. The color changes on the inside, and find a column of stitches that opens to the left on the top side of this arm, and a column of stitches opening to the left on the bottom side. Pick up 1 bar from the top edge and 2 bars from the bottom edge. Now both of these are going to be as close to that cinched part as possible. Now alternate between the top and the bottom edges, picking up 2 bars at a time. This will align those colored stripe areas perfectly. Then just work your way to the opposite end. Before closing this completely, if you want, you can add a little bit of polyfill to the inside. I added just a small amount, although you don't necessarily need this. Now you can pull that seam closed And you can see how the colors line up perfectly. Next, close the opposite end, cinch it closed, and then tie the two ends together. Once that's finished, you can bury the black yarn tail. Once that's finished, repeat for the other arm. And once both arms are finished, we can go ahead and start to sew these on to the body. So sewing on the arms to the Santa, I'm going to start on the side of the body, in the middle of the side, or slightly to the front of the side. It's up to you. And I'm kind of placing it where I want it, and I start by going under a stitch. I'm about the second row from the head, and I'm just mattress stitching from the head, or from the body to the arm. And then I'm going to switch to the side and go down a column of stitches on the arm and a column of stitches on the body. Be mindful of where your needle is. I just snagged that a little bit. And I'm cinching this as I'm working. It's much harder to cinch the whole thing. So as each side is finished, I am cinching that working yarn. Now I'm also checking as I go to make sure the arms are in line with each other. I have a really short tail here that I'm working with. Now when I work on the underside of the arm, you'll notice that I'm picking up stitches that are about in the middle of the arm, not right up next to like where the armpit would be. This is going to help keep the arm more flat to the side of the body versus sticking out. Once I complete that side, I cinch that yarn tail and work along the side. So I'm going through picking up 1 or 2 bars from the stitch, depending on how this is all kind of fitting together. So you don't always have to pick up 2 bars, you can pick up 1. And then once I get back to the top of the arm, I'll go through all of the stitches along that top edge. And then insert the needle so that it goes through the top shoulder area and then out through the bottom of the armpit. Just doing one last check to make sure everything looks good before I secure this. Now I'll just tie a couple of knots and then bury that tail. And obviously I do this for both arms. This one I've already had the first arm done. And now the body is finished. We will move on to making the hat. So again, I'll go through this pretty fast. Using the 32 needle, cast on and knit 16 rows with the red. Then we will switch over to white and knit 13 rows. Again, this time I'm only doing half knots for the color changes. Then switch over to red for another 16 rows. Once that's finished, you can bind off the machine. Once the hat is off the machine, I turn it inside out and secure the color changes, trim the tails, and then fold it in half, matching wrong sides. Cinch both ends closed, secure with a knot, and bury those tails. Next, we will make a pom-pom. I'm using this yellow size from Clover. I think it's about 1 3/4 inches, around there. Of course, you can use whatever size you want. I do have a separate video on how I make my pom-poms, how I tie the knot. I will link to that in the description below, as well as adding a link in the upper right-hand corner. Now that the hat is made and the pom-pom is added, we can add the hat to the top of the head. And I want this sitting at kind of an angle so that it's a little bit longer in the back and up above the eye, where the eyes would be on the front side. I see the white tail is popping through on the red side, so I'm just using my crochet hook to move those tails around. Before I begin stitching, I like to pin the hat in place so that as I'm stitching, I'm not going at a crooked angle. So what I do is I pin the center on the front side, and I'll pick a couple of spots on each side. This just helps me keep things in alignment for when I'm stitching. So now I will start seaming on the back side. I'm using the cream color that matches his skin. You could also use the white. It doesn't really matter because it will be hidden. So make sure your tail is nice and long. Start on the back in the center. I'm about three or four rows up from the neckline. Start by going through one stitch on the head, and then directly above where the hat is, we'll go through one stitch on the hat. Go through both legs and pull that yarn tail all the way through. Then just alternate between the head and the hat, picking up one stitch at a time, going all the way around. As I work my way around, when I come to a point where I need a little bit of an angle, I will insert the needle through one stitch but at an angle. So I'll enter the stitch on one row and I'll exit on the next row up, but I'm only going through one column of stitches. As I approach a stitch marker, I'll just remove it and keep working my way all the way around. After pulling on the yarn to remove that slack in that working yarn, I will stretch that seam. It just makes everything fit a little bit nicer, and you won't see as much of a seam between the hat and the head. I also keep checking to make sure that I like the stitching as I'm going, making sure I don't have any sharp angles. And if I do, I can just back those stitches out and redo it. Once I'm back at the beginning, we'll stretch that seam and then just tie those tails together with a knot and then bury the tails. Now let's add the beard. For the beard, I want to have the beard go from the side of the head on each side and have it come down into the front of the head, kind of a little bit of an angle here. So I'm using the white yarn And I have a ruler that's about 6 or 6.5 inches in width, and I'm just going to wrap the yarn around this ruler. So you can use anything you want. You can use a piece of cardboard, a book, anything that you can wrap the yarn around. That's about 6 inches. 6 inches is more than what we need, but it's a very manageable length to work with. So I'm just going to cut a bunch of strands, and we'll start to add these strands to the face. So I'm working with 2 strands at a time. I'll fold it in half, and I'm starting on the side of his head here, and I just pick up a stitch, and I'm trying to go through both layers. Grab those strands with the hook and pull it through, and then grab the tails and pull through, and then pull down to tighten up that knot. Now I'm not pulling it super tight because I want the yarn to fill in the holes around these strands. If you pull too tight, the knot is too small. So I'm starting with the side. I'm kind of going down, straight down, following a column of stitches. So I'll add the strands on the right hand side through a column of stitches, and then I will start to work my way to the left side, going straight across and then up the other side. This is going to create a frame of where I want the beard. So just work your way across, creating a frame for the beard. Once I have the frame finished, I'll go in and soften those edges and add an extra layer around the bottom side. For the mustache, I'm going to start with about 4 strands, and I'm just going to lay it across the center, and I'm actually going to use some hot glue to keep that in place, just a little dab right in the center. And then I'll add a second layer of about 4 strands using some hot glue as well. I apologize, I didn't get the video of it, but once the mustache is in place, I will go ahead and stitch around it just to finish it off, give it a finished look. For the nose, I'm using this 6-needle I-cord machine with Big Twist light rose yarn. I'll knit about 3 or 4 inches from the bottom of the machine, and then I will cut off the length that I need. Once I have enough length coming off the bottom of the machine, I'm going to cut this off, and then what I'll do is I need to secure this end. So I'm going to pull out all these little bits, have a little bit of a tail, thread my needle, and weave it through all of the remaining stitches. And make a little knot on the end. Next, what I'll do is I'm going to measure out and cut. I need a 1.5 inch length, so I'm kind of holding that length with my thumb there. I cut the other end off, pull out the little pieces, and then remove that yarn until I get to the length I need, which is about 1.5 inches. And then I'll secure this end by going through each of the stitches. Before I cinch this closed, I'm going to go back to the other end. I'm going to leave this open. The stitches are secure, but I'm going to leave it open. I'm going to go back to the other tail and send that tail through the middle and out the other end. Basically, what I want to do here is fold this in half, matching the wrong sides, just like we're making a mini hat. Now we can cinch both ends closed and secure the tails with a knot. Next, we'll send the tails through the middle, or actually I kind of just flipped it inside out so that my tails are in the inside, and I can trim one of the tails really short and keep the other tail for stitching to the body. Now we can stitch this to the head. I'm going to place it right above the mustache, and here you can see how I stitched around those strands, the mustache strands. So now I'm going to stitch this. I'm just going to pick up a stitch directly above that mustache, and we'll match a stitch from the head to the nose, going all the way around the nose. Work your way around the nose, and I pick up one stitch on the nose and go through a stitch on the head. Once I'm back to the beginning, I can just verify that it looks centered, everything's looking good before I put in the final 2 knots. Once those knots are in, I can bury the tails. So now we're ready to add the finishing touches. For the eyes, I made the Santa with some squinty eyes like he's laughing. I'm using black yarn starting on the side of the head, and I'm just going to add some lines for 2 eyes to start with. And then I'll add some shaping to those eyes. I'm trying to make sure that the eyes are the same length and centered around the face. Once the shaping is done, I can go ahead and secure, well, I'll make sure that this looks okay first before securing with a knot and burying the tails. Next, we can shape the beard and the mustache. So I separated the mustache from the beard, and I'm kind of sectioning this off a little bit, trying to decide how I want to cut this. And I just want the bottom of the beard to be kind of a little more pointy than the sides of the beard. So I'm just doing this in little sections, going from side to side and kind of just trimming up a little bit at a time. Once I get the beard trimmed, I'll work on the mustache. And I'm just doing some straight cuts on the side for the mustache. The last thing is to add the gold belt buckle. I'm using Caron Simply Soft in gold, and I'm using a very long strand, and I'm double stranding it. So center that buckle along 2 columns of stitches and along, making sure that it's centered along the legs, the seam of the legs. As you're pulling this yarn through, make sure that the 2 strands are not twisted. Once that's finished, you can knot and bury those tails. I hope you enjoyed the Santa Claus video. Stay tuned for the next character, Mrs. Claus, from the Santa's Little Stitches series. A pattern will be available after the last video has posted. The pattern will include all the characters from the Santa's Little Stitches video series. You can find Calumet Knits on Facebook and Instagram, as well as finished stuffed animals and characters on goimagine.com. Links are below in the description. Thanks for watching.